I die.
The sounds you hear right there, everybody, is Mack Maloney's band, and that song is called Mechanical World out now. Mack Maloney is a musician, a UFO researcher. He's a radio show host. He grew up in Dorchester, so he's a Boston boy also, and they just won the World Series, those bastards. Now, Mack Maloney is somebody who I highly enjoy talking to. I've been on his show. He's been on my show a couple times on the Jackal side, and it's an honor to have him out here right now on Skywatchers Radio with the Dark Matter Radio Network listening in. Mack Maloney, welcome to Skywatchers, my friend. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great, Angel. Thanks very much for having me on.
You know, it's like I said, it's an honor, man. You're one of the coolest people that I've ever met. And, you know, while I've been doing this show for the last 5 or 6 years, and you've written a couple books, man. You have really an awesome album. In fact, a lot of our listeners who listen to the show every week has heard your music because I play it all the time. It's really, really great stuff. Give the audience who hasn't maybe heard of Mack Maloney, give them a little bit of a background on you and a little bit of an insight into who Mack Maloney is before we proceed for the rest of the night.
Well, like you said, I've written a couple of UFO books in the past 3 years. I've been writing full time for about 20 years, though it doesn't seem that long. And I mostly do military fiction books of the line, kind of like Tom Clancy books. But a few years ago, my editor and I had a conversation about UFOs, and that turned into a book called UFOs in Wartime, which is a collection of stories that if you read it, you hopefully will be convinced that UFOs seem to show up more during wartime than they do in peacetime. And then the following, the sequel to that was a book that came out last year called Beyond Area 51, which is a list of secret bases around the world, places like Area 51. And both books were, successful, thank God. And in the meantime, we do have this band that we've put together, again, about 4 or 5 years ago called Sky Club. And that's the name of the album that you've so nicely played music from. A lot of people really like that album. It was recorded here in Boston, but it's a British label called Voice Print Records. It's also available on iTunes. And, that's about it. Between the music and the writing, it fills up most days. So, but please, our Red Sox, they're heroes up here. You can't disparage them like that, Angel. I'm surprised at you.
What got you into ufology to begin with, to be honest? I mean, it's not something that it's common for everybody to get into. I mean, I look at myself sometimes in the mirror, and I'm like, why are you so into UFOs, man? It's just weird. What got you into the whole subject?
Well, when I was a kid growing up, I just loved UFOs. I loved science fiction, and then I also became attracted to UFOs. And I know that they're not really one and the same, but in my mind they are, because a lot of science fiction movies had to do with flying saucers and things like that when I was growing up. And there was just something that always fascinated me about them, and and still fascinates me. I think that even though the UFO community is, it's large and it's getting, bigger every day, and there's a lot of, product out there, books, not just books these days, but, radio shows, movies, DVDs and things like that. It seems like it's growing all the time, yet we don't seem to be that any closer to figuring out exactly what UFOs are. I think it's a really great puzzle. I think it's one of the biggest puzzles in human civilization, and I'm just interested in, helping in my little way find out exactly what's going on with UFOs. So there's just that attraction there that I've had for most of my life.
That wanting to know, that's the same reason, honestly, why I got it. Just the wanting to know what the answer is. It's a hell of a mystery, isn't it? Are we alone in the universe? That's the great question, the grand question, really.
It really is. And apparently we're not alone in the universe, because people do see these things. There have been, just so many sightings that, and all it takes is one sighting to be true. And that kind of makes them all true, So I just hope we're still around, when the puzzle is finally solved. I'd really like for it to happen in my lifetime. I think it would be just an unbelievable thing,
every year I hear that this might be the year we have disclosure. Obama might be the disclosure president. And I'm just like, please do it before I die. I mean, I'm a 36-year-old man. I don't want to die not knowing. Like, please, even when I'm like 65 or 70, and if I'm in my deathbed, I just want to see that last piece of news. And now aliens are here. And I'll be happy. I could die happy then, because that's really what drives us, isn't it? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what drives you to write books and all that.
Wait a minute,
stuff.
dying happy is what drives you? Hold on. Did you just say
dying happy
is what drives you?
No. What drives me is finding out the answer to the question.
Ah, okay.
Then he can die happy.
Then I could die a happy man. It's like after I watch the next Star Wars trilogy, I could die a happy man.
Jerome Clark.
I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid of the next Star Wars trilogy.
Well, anyway, moving on.
I am too.
Yes, me too.
Jerome Clark is a very esteemed UFO writer, and he's someone who I relied on when I was writing the 2 books. He was just someone who I look at as who has his feet on the ground when it comes to UFO research. And he has said many times in the past, in fact, we have a quote in one of the books by him, he believes, and you might still be alive, Angel, but I don't know about me. He said in about 50 years, he believes scientists will finally get around to looking at what UFOs are from a scientific basis. That, to me, is one of the biggest problems, is that there's this ridicule factor when it comes to UFOs, where scientists, they're not going to put their careers on the line to go out and actually study them, as a lifelong pursuit. And but he believes that in about 40 to 50 years, that finally that stigma will fade away, and that scientists will kind of take a look at the UFO problem from, as I said before, a scientific point of view, and then finally, maybe the puzzle will be solved. He also added, or maybe someone else added, that he doesn't think it'll be American scientists, which is kind of sad in a way. He believes it'll probably be scientists from India or China, because in 40 or 50 years, they're probably going to be the dominant countries in the world, and sad to say, probably not the United States, the way things are going. But that's
I think
another topic.
It might be a little bit closer than 40 or 50 years the way things are going.
I hope. Yeah, right.
What do you? I don't know if you were listening earlier, but what do you say to people like the Canadian former defense minister coming out and publicly saying that aliens do exist? Paul Hellyer, of course, the former Canadian defense minister, went on television and declared that not only do aliens exist, but they walk amongst us and are responsible for some of our modern technology. What do you say to stuff like that? Because he's saying it, but where's the proof? I mean, there's no real proof that they did any of it.
Well, he's probably nuts, frankly.
Could be.
I don't
Well, as a
believe...
defense minister, there should be some credibility factors there.
Well, look at the mayor of Toronto up there. I mean,
That's a good point. And New York had a crack mayor at one point. Let's not forget the crack mayor of New York. So,
and and I'm also a Bruins fan, so I can't really talk very well about Canadians. But here's the thing: is I don't really believe. I'm not one of those people who believe that that there is anything to disclose. Let's just take that for a second. I don't believe that the U.S. military or any military around the world or any government around the world know very much more about UFOs than we do. They probably have more evidence. I'm sure that the U.S. military. I know that the U.S. military has more evidence than they're letting on that UFOs exist, and I'm saying things along the line of photographs and videos and sightings by their pilots and so on and so forth, because these things are seen by pilots all the time. Yep. But I'm not one of those people who believe that they know what they are, that they commune with these people, that aliens walk among us and they know it. I don't think they know any more than we do. And all due respect to this the Canadian defense minister, I just don't think that aliens walk among us, and if they do, I just don't think that the defense minister of Canada would be the one who would be telling us about it.
I completely have to say I agree, and this is one of the things I love about you, Mac, is the fact that we agree on this subject so wholeheartedly agree on the simple fact that the government knows very, very, very little, and we are giving them way too much credit to have pulled off some hoax for the last 100 years, when honestly they can't keep anything to themselves. I mean, we're talking about a government that's had problems with the internet recently, okay, with websites for healthcare, and they're having problems with that. For unemployment, they're having problems with the website for unemployment. I mean, a government who can't keep John Wiener from texting pictures of his wiener to people. So this is the government, people. Remember, this is a government of the people, by the people. We elect the people, and apparently for the last 50 years, we've been electing some really dumb people into office. Do you really believe that they can keep secrets like this hidden if they really know a lot? I mean, I could not agree, more with your statement. But to be honest, some of it is beyond even government. If there is such, such devices, such technologies, I do think there's been some retrieval. There's been some crashes in the past, but I don't think that, like you, I don't think that they're here every 5 seconds just whizzing around trying to come in and abduct people and walking among us and all that.
No, because as you say, we live in a world of instant communication, and we also live in a world of people, whistleblowers, of people just talking, unable to keep secrets. No one can keep a secret these days. I mean, that's just the fact. And this Edwin Snowden guy who, ratted out all the NSA secrets and so on. I mean, if there was someone out there in the NSA, let's put it this way. If any organization in the U.S. government knew about UFOs, it would be either the NSA or the CIA. As you say, don't you think that over the past 60, 70 years that just one person would come up and say, here is the definitive proof that UFOs exist and we know what they are? We've heard a lot of these things, but you hear a lot of second, third, fourth-hand accounts. You hear, all these kind of wild accounts by people, and it's always, they don't give their name, or the person who talked to them doesn't want to give their name, their deathbed confessions and all this stuff. Never any kind of definitive proof. Never any kind of solid foundation to these claims. And that's the sad thing about the UFO community. To tell you the truth, is that anyone can write anything about and claim anything, and there's no one there to verify it. So.
No, you know what ends up happening? They end up going on a tour for a book release and a couple DVD documentaries that they put out, and they end up making some money off of it.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
And it's a whole story. Look, Dr. Ergen Mitchell, I've had him on a show. I produced a show he was on once. I've talked to the man. He's a really nice guy. He's obviously a hero in this country, somebody who we should take serious. But, the things he's said over the years, not only can it not be verified, none of it is, you can really take and say, okay, let's look for the evidence. Because, again, there is no evidence. It's just him saying it. And then, of course, he did his lectures and he went around the country and, did what he had to do and made a little bit of money off of it, which is what keeps happening.
It is a way to make money. See, that's once again, you're exactly right, and especially people. Roswell to me is a special bugaboo when it comes to this, is because there are some books that are out there saying that up to 12 or 15 UFOs have crashed in Roswell over the years, and they've recovered 20 to 30 alien bodies, and when you look at that, you think, well, why are all these UFOs crashing in Roswell? And I mean, if you were someone in control of a UFO, wouldn't you avoid Roswell if 15 other UFOs crash there? It just doesn't make any sense that all these things would happen just in this little town of Roswell. I don't think anything happened in Roswell. I think it was just what the government said. I think it was a spy balloon, and people just got all caught up in the story because it's a cooler story, than that a UFO crashed there than a spy balloon crashed.
Right.
I got to interject with a question.
Go ahead, Alan.
I got to interject a question with Roswell. How come then, if it was just a weather balloon, why is Jesse Marcel holding in his hand a telegram that actually talks, and they've actually been able to blow up and enhance the text on it, talking about a crashed saucer in his hand?
Right. I mean, we had Jesse Marcel Jr. on our show, and he was a very interesting guy. He did an interview on our show about 3 months before he passed away. And he was someone who, on our show, we kind of get into it with the guests, more often than not.
Yeah, boy, do you ever. Oh, man, I was listening to one of your shows the other day. Epic.
I know. And, but, I think that's, it's a little more entertaining than, everyone sitting around and singing Kumbaya together. But
agreed, yeah.
He was a very interesting guy. But we thought that we were really going to get into it with him. But it turned out that that he had actually moved up to the Northwest because he just couldn't take what was going on in Roswell anymore. And I've never really seen this blown up picture of Jesse Marcel with the telegram in his hand. I know that there's a lot of stories that go around about Roswell. As I said, there are books that are written that just make all these fantastic claims. But I think when you really look at what happened at Roswell, if you look at the picture, for instance, of the quote-unquote debris, you can match that up piece by piece with debris from one of these secret balloons that they were launching at the time.
Right, but in that same photo, in his hand is a telegram from the War Department that talks about him recovering a crashed saucer in that same exact photo, that sheet of paper in his hand.
Right. Once again, it's always, I haven't seen that photo. Let me put it that way. Okay.
You just described the photo exactly. What are you talking about?
I mean, I haven't seen the blown up of the telegram in his hand.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's seen the original image with him with the picture with the telegram.
Right, and he's got.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I do believe there's something crashed. I don't know if it was extraterrestrial, if it was a weather balloon, if it was something that we back in June or something we were, working on that crashed suddenly, or was a time travel machine. I don't know what the heck crashed, but I do know there was an incident. My thing with that particular incident, and this is why that's the only thing that me and Matt kind of disagree a little bit on. I do think there was something otherworldly, or at least something a little bit more than just a weather balloon, because of the simple fact that Jesse Marcel Sr. was a highly trained individual when it came to weather balloons. He had taken courses in those sort of balloons to like learn how to operate and learn how they work. And I mean, for him to make that sort of mistake is insulting his intelligence, and I am not ready to do that, especially knowing the career he had in the military, and knowing his background and his son's background, who saw some of the wreckage and saw the weird writing on the beam and all that stuff. Those accounts right there. There's always a couple of accounts in ufology that I always look at and I'm like, you know what, that one I kind of have to believe a little bit more, just because of the circumstantial evidence around it, and that's definitely something that you have to look at, Mac.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. What I would like to do is I would like to, we should get a bus together and get us all on a bus, and we'll go down to Roswell and try to figure it out ourselves. I can tell you that in the 80s, I mean, it would be a good road trip anyway. But
it would.
In the 80s, the late 80s and the 90s, I was like really into Roswell. In fact, at one point there was a UFO group that was going to go down there and do an archaeological expedition of the area where the whatever it was crashed, where they would just go there and dig up the ground just like as if they're digging up ancient ruins, and really go about it once again in a scientific way. And I can tell you, I was one of the first people to volunteer to go down there and do that. I was ready to go. But just from my perspective, the more you read about it, and I read more about it, while I was researching the books. Once again, we'll have to agree to disagree.
Well, I mean, at this point, even 20, 30 years later, I mean, really, there's nothing you could really hope to find out there. I would assume the government had gone in and just taken everything out, or whoever did the wreckage, or the pickup of the wreckage. I mean, I'm sure they combed that place dry.
Well,
plus people with metal detectors afterwards also had fun running around the place.
Right. But with archaeological techniques, how you dig up 1 square foot and you sift it and everything, and they were just hoping they would find something that would be, like not of this earth. But I don't think it was ever done down there. But I just wanted to say that, I was a believer at one time, but I suppose as I get older, I get more skeptical.
What cases in ufology do you believe in, or do you have any kind of reservations about saying anything negative because you think there might be something there?
Well, there are there's a lot of them, to tell you the truth. In 1956, there was a case where an airplane was a military airplane, Navy airplane, was flying from Europe back to the United States. There was 100 people on the airplane, and approximately, and a lot of them were Navy pilots coming home from doing duty in Europe. So you had this excuse me, you had this plane full of pilots, and they came upon this enormous flying disc right off the coast of Newfoundland. It's called the Gander incident. And there were, once again, approximately 100 trained military air personnel who were just looking out the windows at this enormous flying disc that flew parallel with this airplane for about a minute or so, and then was seen to take off at just tremendous speed. I mean, there you have a captive audience, let's say. You have people who, pilots, in my opinion, especially military pilots, are our best witnesses for UFO sightings because they've seen it all. They know what Venus looks like. They know what a cloud inversion looks like. They know what lights in the sky coming from other airplanes look like. And when they see something in the sky that doesn't fit all of those type of criteria, they know that it is something strange. So the Gander incident is definitely one of them. There was definitely something over Los Angeles in February 25th of 1942. A million people saw these things flying in the sky, and they were never identified. The Ronnie Zamora case in New Mexico is definitely something to that. There were many, many cases that have really incredible evidence, sightings, and so on and so forth. But I've never seen anything that really comes close to saying that, we actually retrieve pieces of a UFO or of a craft. The Aztec crash in New Mexico, right around the same time as Roswell, has a lot of intriguing evidence. But on the same hand, I don't believe that there were 50,000 aliens inside Dulce Mountain in New Mexico.
No, neither do I. But real quick though, you gotta admit though that those sightings you mentioned with the witnesses you mentioned are equivalent to especially the servicemen who have actually flown. And their career is to be in the armed forces and to fly. Mm-hmm. You got to admit that's kind of equivalent to Jesse Marcel and taking training courses on the mogul balloon and the balloons. I mean, it's kind of equivalent. The knowledge base. I mean, he really literally a year before a few months before, he was taking classes learning about weather balloons. So,
the balloon the secret balloon that was that they were definitely launching in that area at the time. They weren't quite like they were. Well, let me put it. I'm not a balloon expert. Okay, I know that they were top secret balloons that were sent over the Soviet Union with acoustic devices attached to them to see if they could pick up evidence through audio sound. Whether the Russians were lighting off nuclear weapons or not. But once again, Roswell it's one of these things that I still haven't seen the definitive proof that anything extraordinary happened down there.
Well,
but I'll be glad to. I would love to be convinced otherwise.
You got to admit though, it's a good argument on my part there.
It's a great argument. Yeah, that's why I think we should take a road trip down there. We should all just.
I'm down. Alan, are you down?
Okay, I'm down for it. How do we organize it? Who else wants to be part of it? And do we want to sell this to Lifetime or some other channel afterwards? I want to video the whole thing.
Man. You're the man to talk about that because you're constantly on the road. So what we got to do is we got to rent a Winnebago. Yep. Like the one in Spaceballs.
Yeah. Roswell. We'll do a documentary. Roswell Road Trip. It writes itself.
Yeah, it does. So we'll get a bumper sticker that says "We break for nobody" in the back. We'll put that in the back. Yeah, exactly.
What about we break for aliens?
Oh, there we go. Maybe we'll get lucky and we'll find an alien like in the movie Paul.
Oh, yeah. That was actually a pretty funny movie. But
that was.
I would not mind doing something like that. I mean, that would be a really interesting road trip. Actually, next weekend I'll be at an RV show, so I can talk to one of the RV sellers there, see if they donated an RV for us to actually go. Hey, I'm all up for that.
Maybe we'll make a joint venture, Dark Matter Radio Network, PSN Radio, road trip, Perfect. Skywatchers Radio.
Perfect.
Anybody else we could tag on to this? I mean, you're going through the list here,
Yeah, maybe we can get Alejandro T. Rojas to come on board and jump on there and go down there with us. He's into this subject. He's going to be on in the second hour with us, by the way, everybody.
He's a great guy. He's really a good guy.
He really is, and a hell of a researcher, man. I've known Alejandro now since 2009. Mm-hmm. In fact, this is pretty funny. The reason, and I'm gonna spill the beans here.
Here we go again.
I'm spilling the beans. Check it out. The reason I even got interested to do any online radio stuff, mind you, I said before who my 4 heroes on radio are, but the first ufology show that I ever heard on the internet was the think tank show, UFO Think Tank with Alejandro T. Rojas. This is back in his Blog Talk Radio days. That's the very first show I ever saw. Somebody had sent it to me on a link or something. They said, dude, you got to hear this show. It's about ufology. It's great. And I heard it, and I was like, this is a really cool show. And then I started looking on the website that he was on. I don't want to plug him because it's not his website. It's another website. But anyway, he was on some website there, and, I saw the website, I started looking around, and there was like 50,000 UFO shows, and I was like, well, maybe one day I could do a UFO-related show, too. Yeah. Everybody's doing it. And it's funny because, Mac, you do a UFO-related show, even though your show is a little bit like my Sunday show. It's a little bit all over the place. Mm-hmm. You talk about a bunch of different subjects and stuff. But there is a lot of interest in this subject, which is, not to segue too far from what we're talking about, but it seems like it really has crept into the mainstream America. It's part of pop culture. Of course, the little gray alien with the big bulging eyes. Everybody knows about this alien. Everybody knows about the Paul-looking alien. It's really become so part of it ingrained in our subconscious that really, if they told us tomorrow the disclosure, if it happened, I don't think we'd really be that shocked if they just started, spilling the guts. You know what I mean?
No, I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't. I think that you're absolutely right. With the proliferation of all kinds of communication devices these days, and just the way that mass media is these days, where anything that happens in this world is instantaneous. I mean, even when they went into the SEALs went in to get Osama bin Laden, there was some guy, across the street, tweeting about it. I mean, it's just amazing how fast word travels around the globe these days. And I do think too, as there's a lot of people. Here's another thing too about UFO research: is a lot of people think it's only in the United States. Well, it is worldwide, and I found that out when these books came out, because I was hearing from people all over the world, and a lot of other governments are more open to it than the U.S. government is. Certainly, like the government of Brazil, for instance, they're very open about wanting to look into UFO reports. France, believe it or not, is also, they have a minister who is in charge of looking into UFO sightings. England, has a large file that they made public a couple of years ago about UFO sightings. I mean, in Russia, certainly the people in Russia are, fascinated by UFOs. It's a worldwide phenomenon. I think I think the vast majority of people around the world have heard of UFOs, and I'm sure the vast majority of people around the world want to know what UFOs are.
I would agree with that. There's a lot of people that actually have out there the want and the desire to know definitively one way or the other. The whole thing is most of us that are on these shows here are leaning only one way.
Well, see, that's the thing. That's why, and as Angel was saying before, that's why our show, which is on another network, is a little bit different, because, we have people on, but I've listened to lots of UFO shows, and I've been on lots of UFO shows, and really a lot of them, certainly not this one, but there are ones out there that, it's just, you're just going over the same ground over and over again, and everyone is agreeing with each other, and that gets us nowhere. I think that, if someone, like, for instance, we had a guest on our show about a year ago, and he was someone who had done a lot of, let's say, made a lot of money. Well, I don't know how much money he made, but he would give lectures, and he would do things talking about how the Nazis supposedly had flying saucers during World War II. And that actually shot down, our airplanes and everything. And it's complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense. And we called him on it. And we got into such an argument that, he wound up hanging up on us. But he made our point for us. The Nazis didn't have UFOs. They don't have a secret base in Antarctica. They weren't on the moon in 1942. But there are people out there.
They made a movie based on that one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
My whole argument with that is, if they had UFOs, why did they lose the war?
Exactly. What more do you have to say? Why did they lose the war? But people want to believe, because there's this thing out there among some people that think, that the Nazis were kind of cool. They had cool uniforms and things like that, and they, for some reason, they want to kind of continue this idea of the Nazis being these supermen and so on and so forth, and having UFOs, and this guy claimed that there were UFOs shooting American planes during the famous raid on Schweinfurt, in which 60 of our planes were shot down. And I said, you demean the people who died in those airplanes. You demean anyone who was in battle that day by bringing this nonsense into it. I think things like that, and people who believe there were aliens in Dulce Mountain, and all these like really far out crazy fringe stories, I think that is real detriment to real, the real kind of research into figuring out what the UFO puzzle is. And I would really like to see a lot of that cleaned up, and a lot of that nonsense, gone away, so we can really concentrate on what these things are and look at it with a reasonable and scientific approach.
I gotta say once again, I agree. Even though we don't agree on Roswell, that's exactly what we need. Is more of a scientific approach, not the hokey stuff that we keep getting. Doesn't it just upset you when you hear stuff like the crop circle hoax that just recently happened?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I read about that. Yeah,
that got my blood boiling. I mean, look, I like NVIDIA, but that got my blood boiling, Mac.
Because it turned out to be an ad for a chip company or something.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
A graphic chip, NVIDIA.
Yeah. I used to be a PR guy for General Electric, so I can kind of see the beauty in doing something like that, because they knew they were going to get a lot of publicity, and then it was obviously a plan,
not always positive publicity.
No, but, I'll tell you, when they say there's no such thing as bad publicity, that's not quite true. However, here we are, we're talking about them, so there was, it was a certain amount of success for them to go ahead and do it. Will it make them sell more chips? Who knows? But the whole idea is for them to raise their profile around the world, around the country. The mission accomplished in that. As a devious way to do it. I will tell you a quick story is when I was with General Electric, I was in an office in upstate New York, and this is in the 80s, and crop circles started showing up, fairly close to where we were. And there was an engineering firm that we did some business with in those days, and they actually were hired by a newspaper to go out and look at these crop circles. And I happened to talk to one of the engineers afterwards, and I said to him, and it was almost jokingly, I said, what was that all about? I mean, that must have been crazy. And he said, you know what, we couldn't figure out what the hell made these things. So I know a lot of crop circles are faked. I know a lot of them in England, it turns out that they were fake. But at least this one guy said, we have no idea what made these crop circles. This is up in the Syracuse area in the middle 80s. So who knows, who knows what's up with crop circles. A lot of strange things happen in England. A lot of crop circles, happen in England.
The one thing that happens a lot in England that really still, boggles my mind is all the cattle mutilation that's happened over the years and all that stuff. I mean, there's really no answer for that yet.
Right.
If somebody's hoaxing that, I mean, that's a pretty clever hoax.
Right. And that's, over there and also, in the American Southwest, I mean, cattle mutilations do take place. People have found cattle in states that, don't occur naturally, let's say. But are UFOs doing it, or are they? It could be some kind of government plan. I mean, someone once said that it's really the government, and they put something in these cattle just to see how quickly they'll die. That it's just some kind of an experiment, and there's just so many cattle roaming around on grazing pastures out in the American Southwest that it'll be very hard for anyone to kind of catch them in the act, which hasn't happened yet. So who knows? But England, especially when in the book Beyond Area 51, we just do an entire chapter of all the really strange stuff that goes on in England. Is just amazing. People know about Stonehenge, but there's actually hundreds of kind of similar monuments like Stonehenge all over England. There's these strange mounds of rocks that people have no idea who built them or why. There's all kind of ghosts, and it's really just a crazy place. There's a radio over there at an old RAF base that still comes on, and you hear broadcasts from Winston Churchill on this radio. And once again, scientists have looked into it. They can't figure out how it happens, why it even happens when it's not plugged in. No one can figure out how it happens, why it happens. But there are these very strange things that happen, and that's what I like. I like looking at the really strange things and see what's going on there.
I'm thinking that it might be the stone tape theory on that one, with the radio going on. Well, they say that certain types of stone, like limestone and other stones, can imprint radio frequencies as well as emotional and other types of frequencies, and then replay them again and again under certain conditions.
See, it has something along those lines, I mean, for this radio set to suddenly come alive in hearing a speech Winston Churchill gave back in World War II. I mean, that's crazy, but...
Is it the same speech each time?
No, it's just like random... no, they have heard him giving speeches, but they've heard just, regular radio broadcasts from the early 40s on this. And the radio isn't even plugged in, which to me is the most fascinating thing of all. So strange
if it's
things
a crystal radio... If it's a crystal-based radio, it really doesn't need to have that much power. It could just run off static electricity.
Right. Yeah. So once again, strange things do happen. It's good to get all the nonsense out of the way so we can concentrate on these real things that happen and figure out exactly what's going on.
That is bizarre. I've never heard of that, Alan. To be honest with you, that's new to me.
Which topic?
The stones that can record.
Yeah, just look up stone tape.
Never heard of that. I know they say water could be used as a possible storage device because water records data or some crap I heard or read not long ago. Did you read about that?
No, I haven't looked at that one, but I've heard it mentioned more than once before. Yeah.
See, that I've heard of, but no, I'm going to look into that. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's called the stone tape theory.
Maybe that explains ghost activities in some parts of the world.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
There's another, what Jerry Clark's theories is that, and I know a number of people are looking into this now, coming around to this, is that, all of this stuff is connected, that ghosts and cryptids and UFOs and all this strange stuff is really part of one big thing. Which I think would be, just think how interesting that is. There was a photo from 6 months ago of a UFO. Someone snapped a picture of a UFO that's over this very famous haunted barn in California, and it got a lot of people thinking along those lines. They think there might be some kind of a grand unified theory of the paranormal, and that, once again, ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, all this strange stuff we hear about, if it was all part of the same thing, that would talk about mind-blowing. That would be just so fascinating if we could somehow find out if that was the case.
That's a good question because, I've actually often asked that question of my guests here if they think that stuff like demon activity, ghostly activity, if all that can be attributed to misunderstanding or misinterpretation of alien abductions or aliens, interaction with us or whatever. And, everybody has kind of like, well, maybe, I don't know, because nobody really, I think, thinks of it like that. But I think that could be, but more in a material way where we just didn't know any better and we just misunderstood it. But, do you think that's is that where you were going with that, or are you talking about something a little bit different?
No. Exactly that. And the thing, too, is that, from early on, and like in 1947, when Kenneth Arnold saw the first quote-unquote flying saucer, people always just connected them with little green men from Mars. But, there's absolutely no evidence that UFOs are from outer space because there's no evidence of where they are from at all. I think there's a better chance that they're time machines that maybe from our own future that just come back to this time in this place for maybe something as mundane as time travel for just time travel for tourists.
Maybe they're just out like a road trip.
Right.
A road trip through time.
If we had time travel. I would love to go back and see, the Civil War, the Battle of Troy. I asked someone this the other day, and they said, I'd love to go back and see a Shakespeare play. The way that UFOs act, and we get into this especially in UFOs in wartime, is, they always seem to be observing. They're always there, and they're always kind of looking at us. And, it's kind of like the comparison that we come up with in the book is that, when you see these stories on the National Geographic Channel about safaris where they put tourists in a truck and they go out into the savannah and they're watching the lions eat the antelopes and all that kind of stuff. The lions, they see the truck. They have no idea what the truck is or what the people in it are doing. They just go about their daily lives. And that's how we are. We don't know what UFOs are, or what they're doing. We go about our daily lives and they're always kind of up there, looking in on us.
We are the lions.
You're right, and exactly right, and we have no idea whether they are from outer space, whether they're from another dimension, whether they're, animate objects inside them at all. We don't know. The idea that they're little green men from Mars is just one speculation that took off back in the 40s, and most people seem to believe it, but there's no proof that they're not just from, as I say, another dimension, places that we can conceive of, not necessarily from another planet.
You know, it's funny because as soon as movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Communion came out, they switched the whole look of the aliens completely to the little gray alien with the bug-out eyes. Now, that's the standard definition of what an alien looks like. But it used to be little green men from Mars. That's really what everybody was afraid of. It's funny how movies kind of shape the reality of what people see when they have these abduction phenomena. That's kind of amusing, isn't it? And every time there's a big blockbuster movie like Independence Day, for example, it skyrockets the amounts of sightings that people report. It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah, that's called in England. That's called the Will Smith factor. Believe it or not,
the Will Smith factor.
Every time he comes out with some kind of Men in Black or Independence Day, UFO sightings go up. And I was just going to say too is it's the same thing with ghosts. I mean, way back when ghosts were literally depicted as it looked like a person with a sheet around over his head. When you see old drawings from the Dickens era and stuff like that. Now, I mean, they're basically decayed versions of us, if you know what I mean. The popular culture is the thing that shapes what people believe. A ghost is or a UFO is, depending on whatever time frame you're in. Who knows what aliens are going to be depicted as 100 years from now? Maybe they'll be more like us or less like us. Who knows? But it's whatever the popular culture, shows us. That's what most people believe they actually are.
Mac, what do you say about undersea flying objects? Undersea objects, not flying because they're undersea. But what do you think of the theory that they come from within the Earth itself, the hollow Earth, for example? Our good friend and correspondent here on the show, Dennis Crenshaw, of course, is famous for the hollow Earth theory. And what's your thought on the hollow Earth theory? And
I don't know about the hollow
possibility.
Earth theory. But there have been numerous sightings of UFOs coming out of the water, especially down in AUTEC, which is the Navy's Area 51, which is located in the Bahamas. We get into dozens of reports in the book Beyond Area 51 about people who have seen UFOs coming out of the water. And flying off and acting just as UFOs are. And when you think about it, the Earth is covered, 70% of the Earth is covered with water. If the UFOs were going to quote unquote hide anywhere, they would hide in the ocean because it's just so vast and deep. And if they have the capabilities that we see them flying around, when we see them maneuvering in the air, then obviously, not obviously, but there's a good chance that they'd be able to do the same type of things in the water. People have seen objects below the surface of the water moving in ways that is physically impossible. Shag Harbor, the Shag Harbor, incident up in Canada years ago, where they had many witnesses where they had Navy, military, Canadian and U.S. Navy ships surrounding this thing, and it got away at high speed, showing indications of behavior that was physically impossible. I think there has to be some kind of a definite link between some kind of UFO sightings and them coming out of the water, simply because so many people have seen them do it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Listen, we're almost out of time here. We have, of course, Alejandro T. Rojas from Open Minds TV coming up next. I want to give you a moment here to give your website address and give the audience, any way to find you on the internet so they could, check out your show, your stuff. Okay. Go ahead. Take a minute.
Okay, well, wingman.com is the best place to go to for my website. MackMaloney.com is another place. You can just Google Mack Maloney. You hear about the books and also our CD. We're recording a new CD that's coming out this spring called Ufology, where all the songs are about UFOs and about the people that I've met since I've written the two books. The show is on Wednesday nights on another network, KGRAradio.com. It's called Mack Maloney's Military X-Files Show. It's a verbal fist fight almost every night, but we have a good time.
Yeah, it is.
But you've heard it, Angel. You know what I mean. It really is a lot of kind of back and forth, and I think that I just think it's more interesting that way. So the radio show and the books and the Sky Club album, and that's about it.
And there's another album in the works coming soon. When can we expect something out of that?
Hopefully sometime in April or May.
Nice.
And once again, it's all the songs are about UFOs and again, people that I've met since I've written the two books. Let's say the unusual people I've met along the way. So having a lot of fun putting it together, and hopefully it'll be available sometime April or May.
Hopefully one day you're writing an unusual song about an unusual host named the Jackal. You're
in line for our third album. I promise you that, my friend.
Yes. By the way, I think, and I want to make the distinction here. I think I am the only person you've had on your show that was on your show and didn't end up in a verbal back and forth where it kind of got uncomfortable.
You're one of the few.
I had a great time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, anytime you've been on a few times, we always have a really good time because, the discussion goes in a million different directions. You might be the only person who's ever done the interview while you're in your car, too, right?
This is true. A true story. Before we go to a break, I'll tell the story. I was on my way home one day, and I was supposed to be on your show, and I wasn't going to make it. There was a crazy amount of traffic, and I said, you know what? Screw this. I pulled over into a parking lot, which was the parking lot of a bank. And I pulled in and I called in through the Skype on my phone because I have 4G on my phone and it sounds excellent. So I was like, let me just call in and see how it sounds. And I called in, did the whole thing right from my car.
Right. It would be a better story, Angel, if you pulled into the parking lot of a strip club or something.
That would have been a better story, yes.
But, yes. Bank is a little dull, but, we'll take it. And that was a great night. And I thought you were home. I thought you were in front of all your equipment, but it sounded great. It was really interesting.
Love my phone. Mac, love having you on. We definitely have to have you back on real soon, man. You're just an awesome guest to have on the show here. And I know the listeners enjoyed having you on. So please come back and see us again soon on Skywatchers Radio, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it was great listening to you.
Oh, will do. Thanks very much, Angel. Thanks very much for having me on. We'll talk again soon, I hope.
Sounds good, my friend, and we'll definitely have you back on very, very, very soon because, guys, like I said, this is one of the few guys on the internet doing radio that I agree almost 100% with, except for that one Roswell thing.
Well, there you go.
That's just about. Nobody's perfect, though. Nobody's perfect.
Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Take care. Have a good night, Mac. Okay.
I look at it as who has his feet on the ground when it comes to UFO research. And he has said many times in the past, in fact, we have a quote in one of the books by him. He believes, and you might still be alive, Angel, but I don't know about me. He said in about 50 years, he believes scientists will finally get around to looking at what UFOs are from a scientific basis. That, to me, is one of the biggest problems, is that there's this ridicule factor when it comes to UFOs where scientists, they're not going to put their careers on the line to go out and actually study them, as a lifelong pursuit. And but he believes that in about 40 to 50 years that finally that stigma will fade away and that scientists will kind of take a look at the UFO problem from, as I said before, a scientific point of view, and then finally, maybe the puzzle will be solved. He also added, or maybe someone else added, that he doesn't think it'll be American scientists, which is kind of sad in a way. He believes that it'll probably be scientists from India or China, because in 40 or 50 years, they're probably going to be the dominant countries in the world. And sad to say, probably not the United States, the way things are going. But
no,
that's
I think
another topic.
It might be a little bit closer than 40 or 50 years the way things are going.
I hope. Yeah, right. Right.
What do you? I don't know if you were listening earlier, but what do you say to people like the Canadian former defense minister? What got you into ufology to begin with? To be honest, I mean, it's not something that it's common for everybody to get into. I mean, I look at myself sometimes in the mirror, and I'm like, why are you so into UFOs, man? It's just weird. What got you into the whole subject?
Well, when I was a kid growing up, I just loved UFOs. I loved science fiction, and then I also became attracted to UFOs. And I know that they're not really one and the same, but in my mind they are, because a lot of science fiction movies had to do with flying saucers and things like that when I was growing up. And there was just something that always fascinated me about them, and and still fascinates me. I think that even though the UFO community is, it's large and it's getting, bigger every day, and there's a lot of, product out there, books, not just books these days, but, radio shows, movies, DVDs and things like that. It seems like it's growing all the time, yet we don't seem to be that any closer to figuring out exactly what UFOs are. I think it's a really great puzzle. I think it's one of the biggest puzzles in human civilization, and I'm just interested in, helping in my little way find out exactly what's going on with UFOs. So there's just that attraction there that I've had for most of my life.
That wanting to know. That's the same reason, honestly, why I got it. Just the wanting to know what the answer is. It's a hell of a mystery, isn't it? Are we alone in the universe? That's the great question, the grand question, really.
UFO books in the past 3 years. I've been writing full time for about 20 years, though it doesn't seem that long. And I mostly do military fiction books of the line, kind of like Tom Clancy books. But a few years ago, my editor and I had a conversation about UFOs, and that turned into a book called UFOs in Wartime, which is a collection of stories that, if you read it, you hopefully will be convinced that UFOs seem to show up more during wartime than they do in peacetime. And then the following, the sequel to that was a book that came out last year called Beyond Area 51, which is a list of secret bases around the world, places like Area 51. And both books were, successful, thank God. And in the meantime, we do have this band that we've put together, again, about 4 or 5 years ago called Sky Club. And that's the name of the album that you've so nicely played music from. A lot of people really like that album. It was recorded here in Boston, but it's a British label called Voice Print Records. It's also available on iTunes. And, that's about it. Between the music and the writing, it fills up most days. So, but please, our Red Sox, they're heroes up here. You can't disparage them like that, Angel. I'm surprised at you.
The sounds you hear right there, everybody, is Mack Maloney's band, and that song is called Mechanical World out now. Mack Maloney is a musician, a UFO researcher. He's a radio show host. He grew up in Dorchester, so he's a Boston boy also, and they just won the World Series, those bastards. Now, Mack Maloney is somebody who I highly enjoy talking to. I've been on his show. He's been on my show a couple times on the Jackal side, and it's an honor to have him out here right now on Skywatchers Radio with the Dark Matter Radio Network listening in. Mack Maloney, welcome to Skywatchers, my friend. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great, Angel. Thanks very much for having me on.
It's like I said, it's an honor, man. You're one of the coolest people that I've ever met. And, while I've been doing this show for the last 5 or 6 years, and wow. You've written a couple books, man. You have really an awesome album. In fact, a lot of our listeners who listen to the show every week has heard your music because I play it all the time. It's really, really great stuff. Give the audience who hasn't maybe heard of Mack Maloney, give them a little bit of a background on you and a little bit of an insight into who Mack Maloney is before we proceed for the rest of the night.
Well, like you said, I've written a couple. It really is, and apparently we're not alone in the universe because people do see these things. There have been, just so many sightings that, and all it takes is one sighting to be true, and that kind of makes them all true. So I just hope we're still around. When the puzzle is finally solved, I'd really like for it to happen in my lifetime. I think it would be just an unbelievable thing.
Every year I hear that this might be the year we have disclosure. Obama might be the disclosure president, and I'm just like, please do it before I die. I'm a 36-year-old man. I don't want to die not knowing. Like, please, even when I'm like 65 or 70, and if I'm in my deathbed, I just want to see that last piece of news. And now aliens are here, and I'll be happy. I could die happy then, because that's really what drives us, isn't it? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what drives you to write books and all that stuff.
Wait a minute, dying happy is what drives you? Hold on. Did you just
say
dying happy is what drives you?
No. What drives me is finding out the answer to the question.
Ah, okay.
Then he can die happy.
Then I could die a happy man. It's like after I watch the next Star Wars trilogy, I could die a happy man.
Jerome Clark.
I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid of the next Star Wars trilogy.
Well, anyway, moving on.
I am too.
Yes, me too.
Jerome Clark is a very esteemed UFO writer, and he's someone who I relied on when I was writing the 2 books. He was just someone who